Haridwar. Let's continue a little bit on Mahavtar Babaji's book. And now we are at this point in the book where there is a representation of Lord Shiva under the form of Gorakshanath. The preface. Shiva Goraksha Babaji is a manifestation of Supreme Shiva himself and is beyond mortal birth and death. He is still alive, and his deathless presence hallows the Himalayan ranges. Well-authenticated references and writings about him occur throughout Indian scriptural writings, from the Vedic Puranic ages up to the modern times. This is the true Babaji, whom I have mentioned in my personal experiences. The being of whom I am speaking of here, the Mahavtar Babaji, is the radiant head, the fragrant earth, and the undying soul seed of eternal knowledge. He is called the Ancient of Days, the great tree, from whom all avatars, prophets, and divine incarnations have sprung. Even the devas and celestial beings have worshipped him ceaselessly for cleaning the world of recurring sins. It is he who has enlightened the modern age with the soul-liberating science of Kriya Yoga through his disciple Yogavatar Lahiri Mahasaya. Legends are rife about him throughout the length and breadth of India. Alright, so who is Babaji? In my communications and dialogues with sincere seekers all over the world, I have become aware of how much confusion exists as to who this mighty being called Babaji is. Okay, this I've actually seen it in YouTube videos, so it's a little bit, I don't want to put stuff that I already saw on YouTube. The future accomplishment of earth peace through self-peace shall, more than the United Nations organizations, be brought about by the United Minds organization through the practices of peerless science of Kriya Yoga, which is a non-denominational and non-sectarian pathway to world peace and self-realization. The stream of humanity and its evolution may be channelized and directed to the practice of the correct Kriya Yoga and to knowing that Shiva Goraksha Babaji and Babaji of Autobiography of a Yogi are one and the same person. This purpose may be served to the reader's understanding of this book. The central theme and spiritual purpose of writing this book is given below. So before we go this, I'm just going to mention one thing. So the leader and founder of the Hamsa Yoga Sangh, which is a student of Babaji, a disciple of Babaji, and that is this gentleman here, Yogi Siddhanath Gurunath. He basically mentions here that that Kriya Yoga is a pathway which was provided millions in the past by to mankind through different people, among which the first one was Lahiri Mahasaya, and then lately, since the passing away of Lahiri Mahasaya, it's become more of a job for other people, such as himself. Himself being Gurunata, or like his Italian devotees call him, Gurunata. It kind of sounds like Guru Zero and Guru Mother, Guru Mata, Gurunata. Anyways, Lord Guru. The Lord Guru is his name. But he mentions this is a non-denominational. Hamsa Yoga Sangh is non-denominational and non-sectarian pathway to world peace and self-realization. The stream of humanity and its evolution may be channelized and directed to the practice of the Kriya Yoga and to knowing that Shiva Goraksha Babaji and Babaji of autobiography of a yogi are one and the same person. This purpose may be served through readers' understanding of this book. Essentially, what I'm giving you is my understanding of the book and a little bit more. So whatever purpose you get from this, be always for world peace and civilization. This is what I'm trying to say, because this was the meaning of the book. Therefore, when you hear me talk about formulas and all these things, the purpose of those things is not to advance human science, it's not to understand better the genesis, it's for world peace and self-realization. Until you folks can understand that, you will not see the true meaning and the utility of this. This is the same thing as getting a job to get money to eat, which is the reason why you get a job. And then, you know, what really happens is you get a job, you start making money, and now you just don't know where you are. You eat, but you don't need all your salary to eat. So, or for example, you want to buy a television, so you get, once you have the money to buy the cheapest television, you don't buy the cheapest television. You actually keep on making money, keep on making money. So it really is not as it looks. In the complete communication that you get from reading a book like this and watching, you know, the videos that I'm doing, it doesn't really, it's not going to be completely, how do I explain this? You actually get more than world peace and civilization. But, you know, folks, the world peace and civilization is the goal of the experience, it's the goal of the book, and this is why it is the goal of my writing as well. A consequence of that is better understanding. You actually get the better understanding. That's what formulates the world peace. So the transmission, verbal transmission, language transmission for a purpose. It is not the truth. I told you the word Babaji. The word Babaji doesn't make justice to who the entity is. Just like you say the word sun, like the sunshine, but the sun is also the sun, the grandson, the son of someone. It's also song, which means sound in Spanish. So these things are, it's like a sound, many interpretations. Likewise, reading this book will cause for 1,000 people to interpret it differently. But if you keep in mind that the goal of this book was self-realization and world peace, self-realization, you will understand all the book in the same way. This is how people have to start reading books in a certain way. Books like this, because this is a transmission. If you read this book and you are brought to other things, it doesn't really do justice to the book, and the book itself doesn't do justice to Babaji either. But it is a method that we have of communicating, and knowledge is transmitted in that way, in a ripple. Therefore, what I say is not as good as this book. You see, folks, because it's based on the book. It's not based on Babaji. My experience of this book is what gave me the capacity to build on the knowledge of the book. But in reality, experiencing Babaji, you know, as he experienced himself, is the honest, most purest form of Babaji, and that is why the first poem of this book is actually Shiva Goraksha Rahasaya, Shri Shiva Goraksha Rahasyam. And who else but Lord Shiva can do that? Can Guru Nath do that? Not really. You know, it's like something from above. I mean, you describe it just like you describe your parents when you're 2 years old. But by the time you're 16 years old, you're describing your parents completely different. And then by the time you're 52 years old, you're describing your parents completely different, because you have matured, your language has developed itself through the experiences of life, and now you're seeing your creation through glasses, which really are just but how you are seeing the world. Folks, I think I'm catching a cold. Sorry there. So that is why when you read a commentary, such as the commentary that I'm writing for this book, it's actually nicer if you have this book and you read the commentary right next to it, because the commentary actually progresses as this book itself progresses. And as a consequence, you know, my book is basically written based on this. For example, if Guru Nath says something on page 16, I will say page 16, note on what Guru Nath said. And then I give perhaps a more mundane interpretation, more simplified interpretation, in the sense that it doesn't carry the weight of the experience of Babaji. You know, so in that sense, I mean, I'm basing my experience on his more diluted form, plus my own experience, but, you know, to each his own. Like he says here, basically it's the purpose may be served through the reader's understanding of this book. Such is my purpose. My purpose is actually given from my heart. You know, I just felt like doing this commentary on it. I wasn't seen by a sage who told me write a book, you know, nothing like that. Yeah. Like Yukteswar Masaya were actually, you know, told, it's like, hey guys, you have to. But a silent Buddha is, silent Buddha will not talk. And then somebody has to go to them and tell them, listen, you're a Buddha, now get to work, you know. Or there's sometimes stories of Mahasiddhas, of people that are very enlightened, that they live in cages, and then they get visited, and you know, basically, you know, this is the flow of X is always constant. X is not faster a moment than another. So in a sense, this is the constant that we're talking about. This is the movement. The movement is fixed in the rate. So the rate is fixed. So this will not move through time, regardless of where you are in time. Even if you travel back in time, the movement of the rate is actually constant. This is our definition of when you draw a two-dimensional X by Y card. In terms of creation, when you create something like this, and I will say it is my assumption, when you do something like creation and you time, it is not enough, because you're seeing then things like this. It's just a single dot. You need two things to move. Blip. Then when you create two things to move, then you have divergence. You can be at one dot, and then you can have the dot which was the initial. So you have the initial dot, which is like this, a one-dimensional dot, a projection, which is impossible to observe unless you create another projection. So in this other projection, you know, it's like time and movement, you know, but it really is just a different moment in time. But anyways, at a perfectly kept speed, then the truth becomes the rate which never moved. Okay, so the first point, which was 0, was translated into 1. The 1 then was translated into 2, but then you have 2 points, you have a 0 origin, and essentially it's the time and the time before that. Kal Mahakal, Shakti Kal, Kali, Mahakal. Okay. So I'm actually thinking about going to get something to eat, blowing my nose, taking medications for allergies, which I have right here. So going back to the mass, the idea of mass. When you are replicating going to church, folks, you're replicating going to the kingdom of God, which is the Son upon death. This is what's called gravity. Gravity comes from repetition. It doesn't come from how much you weight. How much you weight is a sign of something different. Let me blow my nose. I can't take this anymore.